Hello and welcome to Worldbuilding Fantasy. This is Dave, the Worldbuilding guy, and again I have with me my good friend V.
Hello.
Hello there again. So, this is another subcategory, I guess, of our podcast that we're going to try and do called Worldbuilding Fantasy. This is going to be a little bit different compared to world building chats where we discuss maybe certain specific movies just to chat about them or whatever. Here, this is a little bit of an experiment of ours. We want to see if we can discuss the various implications of magic in any given, or any specific, let's say, scenario. We have a few rules, and this will be a possible ongoing series. Do you want to take this?
Well, we can talk about the rules. We can talk about some disclaimers.
Yes.
So this first podcast, we are speaking about magic specifically within the fantasy realms.
Hence the title.
So our disclaimers are, this is strictly fantasy-based magic. We're not talking about any sort of real-world religions or spiritual beliefs. Nothing that's true to current society. This is just basically if magic was dropped in our laps.
So keep it calm over here, guys.
Yeah, we're not attacking
Chill.
anybody or making commentary on anybody's personal beliefs. This is just strictly fantasy based. Also, we want to let you know that we're coming from a Western point of view on this. I am American. So my views are not only just a Western point of view, but also an American point of view of magic, growing up in America. So there are plenty of other types of magic users that we're interested in, but I certainly don't feel like I have any authority to speak on all of them. I'm just kind of going with what I know. And of course, David is going with what he knows.
Yeah, and just a little bit of a tidbit for those of you who don't know. I'm actually not just European, I am full-on Italian. And no, I don't just mean that, I'm from Jersey or whatever. No, I'm born and raised in Italy, and in fact, we are currently in Italy doing this podcast, this whole series, this whole channel. So I will, while I'm not an expert in
Folklore.
in folklore, nor do I claim to be. I have a bit, at least a cultural exposure towards a European point of view when it comes to magic and stuff like that. But of course, I am also very, very, very American influenced as well. So I don't know. We'll try and work our way around this and that here and there whenever we can. Obviously, if you guys have any comments or recommendations on, I don't know, other parts of the world and their specific kinds of folklore, magic, etc., by all means, let us know in the comments down below. And if you want any specific episodes on that, we will do our best to try and, I don't know, analyze them, find out as much as we can, and maybe one day we'll make some episodes about that too. But
Absolutely.
We'll see.
Another slight disclaimer is we know that there sometimes is gender bias in magic. I think we are going to generalize how we view magic, but we might come up with questions, like certain questions that have to do with certain gender biases. But other than that, we're thinking of magic in general terms, gifted to anybody in particular. So we're not. Obviously we know in history there's been gender biases, but we're not really looking at it from that point of view. Although if you want to have discussions about that in the future, we would be game for that as well.
Yeah, I mean, we will do exceptions only if required on the specific topic of the day. Like, otherwise, we're very much generalizing. Like, if we were to make an episode on what if magic happened, but only for children or something like that, then that would be its own episode, as an example.
Yeah.
But otherwise, we're going to pretty much generalize unless specified.
Yeah. And so that kind of brings us into the rules of what we're talking about today specifically, and the theme that we will be going throughout the series as we talk about different types of magic users. The general sense of the rule is that this is magic that is happening in our current world as we are now. So, and it's starting from now.
Yeah. So this is a world building channel, obviously, and if we were to say like an urban fantasy situation where it's like, I don't know, Bright from Netflix, which I'm gonna make an episode on that in the future because oh man, the things I have to say on that on the things that don't make sense on that one. We're not going to be talking about what if magic always existed in our society because that is way too big a subject to tackle. More so, we will just focus on what if our entire history of human civilization has been exactly as it was up until now, and from now onward, something quote unquote magical, depending on the category of or the topic of the day, is suddenly dropped on us, and how we would react to that. And we will be exploring the different topics of our human world and how those would be affected.
Yeah, we're not retconning current history
Yeah, no.
or ancient history. We're not retconning any history. This isn't a situation where somebody's coming out of woodwork. With that being said, we can have that discussion as well.
Yeah, again, it depends on the situation if we need to discuss it or not.
And if we decide to delve into that, we will specifically say that within the episode. Or if you guys would like us to explore something specific, let us know in the comments, and we'll look into that as well. So with that being said, the rules are just that it's the current world. Magic is dropped in on us today, and the only thing that might be different in the scenarios is if it's dropped, how it's dropped into us. Like if people just suddenly have magic powers, or children start displaying magic powers, or something of that nature. But the rules is that it's just where we live, and suddenly there's magic.
Yeah, and we will be exploring each episode the different kinds of magic. Now, for this first episode, it's just a generalization. We will be discussing, I guess, we will be explaining mostly our views on what different types of magic there could be, different types of magic users, and then we will go more into detail in each episode in the future.
And I should probably just put in a weird disclaimer. This is, coming from, an American / a European mindset, but also we're geeks.
Oh, yeah.
So some of this might be, lifted from folklore, but some of it's going to be lifted from things like D&D or movies or film series.
From my end, it's mostly that. Yeah.
So, the broadening question is, what are these types of magic users and how are they using magic? And we're kind of going to set our own limits on that.
Because limits are going to be very important on this.
Yeah,
because if we go, the power to move the goddamn planet, well, we're just doomed. Because here's the thing, we're trying to avoid a scenario of a type of magic that suddenly exists that would automatically just mean society is doomed, apocalypse, whatever. Because it is because our society is very delicate as it is, and we're very susceptible, language, no, hello, to change, especially big ones. Imagine something like magic suddenly dropping on us. So we will be being very careful and specific and selective on our types of magic to avoid the this thing happens, that means suddenly society is like doomed and we all destroy ourselves to kingdom come.
And we're also kind of going to be defining magic on our own terms. Like, if we're talking about a wizard versus, a sorcerer or a enchanter, like we're kind of going to be defining where this magic comes from. Now, that's on us because we are literally just trying to create a cohesive thought for different types of magic. And, the lore on magic is so wild in any sense that we're kind of just mainstreaming it for ourselves. But again, if you have any different ideas on a wizard's magic versus a sorcerer's magic or versus a druid's magic, then let us know in the comments. We're interested about having those discussions too. We're just kind of trying to mainstream our ideas.
Yeah. All right. Well, we said we repeated it ourselves a lot as of right now. We realized that. So I think it's just to finish off this clarification. These are the types of first off the types of magic users we are going to chat about first off on differentiating, such as wizards, witches, enchanters, druids, sages, warlocks, sorcerers, seers or oracles, and stuff like that. We are also specifically talking about humans, as in, what if humans get all these magical things? We are not talking about necessarily animals changing. We could even maybe one day do a further exploration, sorry, on what if certain magical beings or animals suddenly existed, like what if dragons existed, what if unicorns or mermaids or whatever existed. For now, it's just how we as a society, as humans, would react.
And we're also, on that note, not talking about Tolkien-esque things where wizards just suddenly pop up in our world
Yeah, no, it is
as a
us.
different being.
Yeah,
It's
no,
us.
because that would very much give us the separation of an us versus them, and that's easy. We kind of know how that's going to end up. So we might as well just say thing happened all of a sudden from today or in these days, and it happens to us humans. How would we react differently? How would we handle it even? I don't obviously depending on other subjects, such as if we need specific tools for that or whatever, or where the magic comes from. We will be doing different episodes on what different source of magic. Well, we'll be discussing that. And we will also these are the categories as of right now that we can think of on what aspects of the world would be influenced by the magical topic of the day, such as medicine, warfare, legislature, education, labor, architecture, the arts, technology or science, social dynamics, transportation, agriculture/environment, economics, philosophy/psychology, and others.
Anything else we can think of.
Anything else we can think of. I don't want to promise that we're going to be tackling every single one of these because we're not experts of the world. There's probably a lot we don't know, and there could be times that maybe we might be repeating ourselves because, I don't know, architecture, there's only so many things that could be influenced by the different types of magic. So this is all very loose, just to be clear.
And that's our introduction, folks.
And that's our introduction. Man, that took a while. We apologize for that one, but we'll be going more into discussion. All right, so now that we've disclaimed all of this, let's start seeing how we want to categorize these types of magics in different ways. What our views are on, first off, the different roles, witches, wizards, sorcerers, etc. So ignoring necessarily the origin, unless we really want to talk about it.
Yeah, we'll deep dive on origins in later episodes. But basically, this is kind of what we have come to agree upon as far as what magic is. So there's the type of user, the practitioner. There's how they got their magic, and there's the type of magic that they use. So, for example, if you have a wizard, in my personal mind, wizards are learned. I'm pulling from some from D&D, from certain Arthurian lore, but the learned magic, the type that you actually studied to become
something that you can practice. Like it's something that you have to do
like a doctor. The doctor of magic, the wizard.
You mean the strange doctor of magic? Yes. The Doctor Strange
of magic? The
Doctor
Strange of magic
there you go.
Is a wizard.
And yeah, so we'll start with this. For as far as we're concerned, at least. And by the way, you are all more than free to just categorize for your own stories magic users in whatever freaking way you want.
Exactly.
This is just our view, and we might get things wrong, but still.
And again, we are generalizing because it's hard to have these discussions if there's not rules.
Yeah,
to go along.
Like for example, for wizard, a D&D wizard is a little different from a Harry Potter wizard.
Absolutely, and again, Harry Potter wizards and witches are genderized, and not all lore is genderized. You can have female wizards, you can have male witches.
Yeah.
But it's different for the story you're telling. So we are again just generalizing.
Yeah, in fact, I'll start by saying, like, at least from my view, I have, and to my knowledge at least, I was always under the impression that a wizard is usually a male who can do magic, regardless right now if it's learned, if it's natural, if it's whatever. Whereas a witch is usually female. This is mostly because I think of witches like the Salem witch trials or whatever, where, minus one or two exceptions perhaps, it was usually females who were considered to be witches, and those things happened to them. So in my view, it's this. Now I know there are some exceptions. For example, the Owl House, which by the way, V has seen all of it as of right now. I have not. I just started season 2, so no spoilers for me at least, please. Not yet. In the Owl House, it seems that every magic user is called a witch. So much so that apparently even the main emperor is a witch. I don't know if there's anything else that we're going to find out. You do, don't tell me. That's one example. Depending on what we choose, we could decide to maybe do episodes on whether we want to follow this usual idea of witches are suddenly real. That means only women, and that means how they would affect the rest of the world. For example, there's a book, which I haven't read, but I know the premise at least, called The Power. I don't remember the author's name because I suck at names.
I don't know the book, unfortunately.
Okay, well, this is an idea where, I don't know the context, women suddenly have this ability where they can shock people just by touching them. And it's only women. So, okay, that's, for example, one scenario. Maybe I should read that one day. But I'm a slow reader, so we'll see. I don't make any promises. That's one thing. So, in my view, that's the difference between a witch and a wizard in general.
But that's not generally the case, or that's not always the case.
Yeah.
Because while I am aware, because I am a little bit more, I wouldn't say I'm an expert by any means, but my interests lied when I was younger. In folklore and things of that nature. And so, for me, I have more of a open mind on there being male witches, especially if we're talking in the real world, which, we don't really want to, again, get into that because that delves too closely into people's personal beliefs, and that's not really what we're talking about.
We don't want to judge or whatever. Don't get us wrong.
Yeah. People's personal beliefs are their own, and that's fine. But I experienced being around the idea that witches are both male and female, as well as in the media and the folklore that I've read growing up. Wizards were generally male in the older tales, but in modern reading and things like Dungeons and Dragons and other types of role-playing games, wizards and witches are just whoever wants to be one. So
and ironically, I'm just maybe I'm just this blindsided or whatever. I just realized that the differences of witches and wizards in pop culture media, witches are girls, wizards are boys. It kind of only applies to these two because the other ones, they're kind of neutral. Like you have a sorcerer or a sorceress. Druid is general, sage, warlock. Yeah, pretty much all of the other ones. Enchanter, enchantress. They're all broad categories.
Yeah, they're just genderized based on their name. But, in my mind, it's
whatever.
like somebody calling somebody an actor or an actress. Like, the person's still
whatever.
an actor. They still act. And so...
As long as you do your job.
I mean, and a lot of people define, witches and warlocks in a male and female sense, too. So...
They do?
Yeah.
Like what? Like a warlock?
Warlocks are always male and witches are always female kind of thing. I've seen that in media.
Not to my knowledge, because a warlock, while more typically, yes, a warlock is just, at least based on D&D logic, it's just someone who is not possessed, but harnesses the power of a specific ultra-powered, ultra-divine, whatever being. And it could be anyone who is harnessing or channeling that. Yeah. It doesn't matter who. Well, so if there was a difference, I was not aware of it.
Well, in a lot of the media that I've consumed, the idea is that when witches are gender-based defined, it's because their nature is a feminine magic, whereas a wizard or a warlock uses something that's not a feminine magic, so it's a masculine magic. But again, this is like, I feel like a gender studies question and
Please
not
no.
necessarily
Yes, please no.
a fantasy question.
Yeah.
So long story short, witches and wizards are male or female depending on, nobody cares, like, or non-binary or whatever. It, like, just if a person is a wizard, then their power is from the arcana.
Yes.
And they are a learned person. If they are a witch, this person is a learned person, because in my mind, witchcraft is something that you learn. But their magic is based in nature and not necessarily the arcana. If you are a druid, that's an innate type of magic in my mind, although it might not be in yours, but something that you are naturally given. Sometimes it could be divine based, but in my mind, it's something that you're naturally given and it's nature based. Whereas like a seer might have received that gift from a divine being and their magic is divine based, so those are the different types of things that we're looking at. We're looking at, who's learned, who has been given this gift by a being, who just was born with it, or was their magic unclear? Like, it just popped into their life suddenly, like, out of nowhere, out of the blue. One day somebody is, just a normal person, and the next day they can levitate. Just nobody knows where it came from. It just came from somewhere. But then there's the types of magic, which in my mind are arcana, nature-based, divine-based, or some sort of mixture of all of them, or it's unclear what type of...
Or magic radioactive waste.
Yes, magic radioactive waste that turns you into part man, part spiders. Man spider.
Hey, I thought we were doing types of people, not fantasy races. Although we could do that one day, I guess. Yeah.
Anyway, so those are the different types of magic users and what types of magic we'll be talking about going forward. Something that we also wanted to discuss is where this magic is affecting us. Like, is it affecting us going forward because our children start being born with magic, or does it just drop in certain people's laps?
Yeah, because if we start saying that, and then we can make specific videos on this topic, or these topics, if we say that it starts with certain children being born all of a sudden with magical abilities, regardless of the type, whatever, then either this is X-Men or it's My Hero Academia. And even then, we would have to make a difference if their magical abilities are starting off like from the get-go when they're toddlers, in which case, good luck, babysitters,
that's
and good
chaos.
good luck making the Jack from The Incredible Short real for everyone. Suddenly, babysitters would have to be like military soldiers. That's a cool world building idea. There you go. It's a dangerous profession to be a babysitter.
The training is intense.
Exactly.
4 years of college.
Oh dear God! Someone lost an arm and a leg. Oh my God! Were you in Iraq? No. Little Timmy. Or maybe born with it, but their abilities don't come out basically until later in life, whether they're 10-year-old kids, teenagers, or young adults. Or even then, if it has to be something slow, like for example, let's say, regardless of the origin, you have a kid who's born with like fire magic, and even then we'll categorize all the different kinds of magics we want. Is this kid born with fire magic, or do they get it all of a sudden later in life? And if it's since they're born, can they just make occasional little sparks, and that's it when they're small kids, and they have to keep practicing until they can cast a proper fireball as they're adults? Or can they immediately shoot fire as toddlers? Oh my God, the horrors. It's almost a good thing that magic doesn't exist, as much as I'd love it. Or do they suddenly have not full control, but full output of their magic after a certain age, in which case they would need proper training, otherwise they'll become immediately dangerous, or potentially immediately dangerous.
That's true.
Yeah, think of a troubled teenager or whatever who suddenly gets fireballs, and then it's barbecue bully.
Well, then in that case, maybe we should talk about what our limits would be for these magics. Like,
Yeah. So in the ground rule is that you don't have nuclear powers or whatever from the get go.
yeah,
Like
no
we're
Scarlet Witches.
no Scarlet Witches, no altering reality, nothing too extreme. I would limit it more to, first off, we can limit it to either mana, like you have only a certain amount of mana per day or whatever, or maybe it's tied to your own bodily energy and
Stamina.
stamina. Just become tired after a while, or
Or if we're talking about, say, suddenly a divine being, and by divine I just mean any being that has more power and the ability to gift it than is currently on the earth, say.
we will not be falling into the category of like what if magic came from space, because then we're very close to spilling into sci-fi more than magic, which by all means is cool. We could maybe do a whole other series on this, probably a world building sci-fi series.
Exactly.
But that's a different topic. We're trying to. Oh yeah, we should clarify. We're going to try our best to make sure the magic is not explained too much, unless we make an episode that is specifically that comes from some divine powers, in which case it's not explained, but at least we know where it's from.
Yeah.
We will not be discussing too much on how the scientific ways happen unless we make a few small exceptions. Because let's face it, there's the classic term, magic is just science that we just don't understand. True. So if we start to suddenly understand magic, like maybe it's quantum stuff, or maybe it's alien based, or maybe it's cosmic energy, we're crossing the line and ending into sci-fi, possibly even superhero stuff, which by the way, superhero very much includes magic. Just look at Doctor Strange, Doctor Fate, or whoever. But you know what I mean.
So anyway, basically, we will probably discuss somebody who gets a gift of magic from somewhere else, and that might be what their limit is. Their patron or their whatever being they're getting this magic from maybe only has an upper limit of that. But those types of magic users will be discussed in detail in a different episode. We won't necessarily be discussing them in this one.
Yeah, we will be putting limits either way, some way or another. Maybe it's mana, maybe it's stamina, maybe there's drawbacks to it, maybe you need ingredients, maybe. Look, there has to be some limit to magic, also because, like I said, if there aren't any limits, we're all doomed, period. And also, I mean, limits are what make stories interesting, unless it becomes a horror.
And we'll also be discussing a little bit about whether these magic users exist together in the world, or we only have wizards, we only have druids. It's
Let's do some examples. Okay, so maybe ignoring the difference of witch and wizard, let's just say wizard in general. We can also discuss how some of these categories of magic users could maybe differentiate between each other. For example, let's just clam together witch and wizard. Let's just say they're the same thing. A wizard versus a sorcerer. A wizard, we said, is someone who learns. They're probably like, spoilers, Ned from Spider-Man No Way Home, whom turns out, he actually had ancestral magic in his family or whatever, or there's some magical ties or something like that, where he can technically do it, but it doesn't mean they can do it immediately from the get-go. At least from what I remember in the MCU, magic, unless you are a witch like Scarlet Witch or whatever, you actually have to learn your magic like Doctor Strange did. At least they're sorcerers, so man, they really mixed up their terms a little bit there. All right, no, screw that. Let's just say a wizard type versus a sorcerer type. So someone who learns their magic, they might need some basic magical affinity, because we can't just say that everyone has magic, otherwise that's just chaos.
Although you could make the argument that not everybody is willing to learn something. Like I probably have the capability to be a physicist, but I'm not going to spend my time doing that because it just doesn't interest me. Or I might not actually have the ability to be a physicist, and I'm just fooling myself. I think there's always the ability or the idea of that if something is learning based, you're going to limit yourself in some way. Somebody might be the greatest wizard on earth, and somebody might be a mediocre wizard, and somebody else might not really even be a wizard just because they don't like magic at all.
You clearly have not listened to enough motivational videos. But yeah, we can say, yeah, ignoring on the choice of wanting to keep, if not pursuing, at least practicing their magical affinity. Let's say you have a certain amount of people who can do magic of some sort. You have your wizards versus your sorcerers. Someone who can learn magic at a base and can keep developing it versus someone who is naturally gifted at it. We could maybe go the D&D route of, at least, correct me if I'm wrong, correct me if I'm right or wrong, guys, because I love D&D, but the rules sometimes elude me. It's a limit that I have, and I can't help it.
And a slight disclaimer also, we're probably going to be talking about 5e just because that's the type of that's the current edition that is the most popular right now in media.
Yeah. You probably know more than I do. I love D&D, but I really have this weird filter of understanding all the rules. Anyway, a wizard maybe is someone who learns. Maybe the output of their magic isn't that strong, or they can do it only a certain limited times a day, but they have the option of learning more types of magic. They're not as limited. Like, they can do various elemental kinds, they can maybe do some mental magic, different kinds of things, but each thing is more limited either in their output or how many times they can do it, or the intensity or the duration or something like that. Versus a sorcerer who instead maybe has natural magic that just comes from within. And on the flip side, they
don't get to choose what magic they're doing necessarily.
Well, they don't get to choose, but maybe their output is a lot stronger. Like, if they cast a fireball, they can do it maybe more times or more intensely or something like that. But they have much fewer choices in magic, and because they're born with it and they don't have to necessarily they can't learn other magics, they're stuck with whatever they have. So how would society react in different ways to this differentiation? Ignoring, like, the implication in general of magic existing all of a sudden. How would they react? This very much feels like the magical jock versus nerd type scenario to me, where you got your studious ones versus those who are just born talented. In which case, honestly, that alone has its own implications on which are the ones who will also succeed further ahead in life. Because there's also this thing. I found out there's a little experiment by I don't know if a sociologist or a psychologist, whatever, in the 90s. An experiment with a bunch of kids during the 90s. She split these kids into two categories. All these kids had to complete certain puzzles of various amounts of difficulty. All right. One side is told that they are naturally gifted kids, that they have a lot of talent on their own, and maybe they're just smart on their own, maybe they're just creative on their own. They're just naturally gifted in some way. Mm-hmm. The other side, they told these kids that they're not necessarily gifted on their own, but they are hard workers. And they are the ones who tend the most to put effort into whatever they do, and they're the ones who can accomplish the most. They then set out the experiment, and they found that there was something quite interesting happening. The kids who were told were the most talented, they did the base level...
The bare minimum?
Honestly, yes. They did the base level puzzles very quickly, very well. But as soon as they started leveling up towards the harder types of puzzles, they gave up more easily because, I guess, if I remember correctly, the reasoning here is that, I am talented. I don't need to necessarily put that much effort. I know I'm talented. Maybe this is just a little bit too hard. Maybe I don't need to, simply put. Versus the other team, who they were told that they weren't necessarily talented, but they were hard workers. So even if they struggled in the beginning with the even base level pieces, they did that. And they were more willing to keep going towards higher level puzzles until they completed, I don't want to say the hardest ones, but much further ahead than the other team. So imagine this, if we apply that psychological logic. Hey, we're talking about the psychological category already. Look at me. we put that into the wizard sorcerer difference. There's a statistical higher chance, if this is a real thing, for wizards, regardless of how society becomes constructed, if one's magic becomes suddenly real, for wizards to technically get further along in life and further ahead in their, let's say, careers, if they base their careers on their magical abilities, because they're the ones who are the most willing to experiment, the most willing to do this and that and whatever. They become jacks of all trades, masters of none.
Well, I feel like I've heard that, I've heard of that study before. I think that also the implication is on societal and personal limits when you're told that you're talented versus that you're told that you're hardworking. Because if you're told that you're hardworking, then you believe that you can do anything with enough hard work. But if you're told that you're talented, as soon as something is hard, you either societally or internally just believe that you've reached your limit.
Yeah.
Unless you're told that you're talented and you're hardworking, and then those things go together, in which case, if you tell somebody that they're talented and hardworking and they're susceptible to believing that about themselves, then the sky's the limit, because if they can't do it, then they just try harder. But
even then, it depends on which they believe the most, or which they want to internalize the most. If they believe more that they're hard, they know they're hard workers, but they
think that
polish more the idea that they're also talented, and that they're just naturally talented, and so they fall back into the laziness. So yeah, there's already these kinds of differences. Or for example, the druids are going to be the hippies. Let's just face it. And if they're not that already, maybe there's a higher chance that they will become that. Versus, maybe we'll not touch on warlock right now, because that implies that they have a specific source of magic, possibly divine or beyond our reality, that they are channeling. So we'll put that on hold for now. It's a little bit too big to tackle. But let's say, what's your definition of a difference of, for example, a sage?
A sage to me is somebody, kind of along the same lines of warlock, where it's somebody who, a sage to me is kind of somewhere between a druid and a warlock in terms of where they get their power. And I'm not necessarily talking about the implications of a warlock being, drawn to darkness, but that they get their power from an outside source. Like, sages to me are somewhat more, nature or divine based in their magic. They're not necessarily. It's not necessarily like a sorcerer where it's like a strong magic, whether it's arcana based or whatever, or a wizard where they keep gaining knowledge of it. It's kind of somewhere softly in the middle, like someone who has a magical affinity but doesn't necessarily, but the implications of where that natural affinity come with fall somewhere along the lines of divinity or nature.
That's interesting, because my idea, and maybe it's because I have it's because it sounds like something else. I had a very different idea of what a sage was. My idea of a sage is very influenced by the term itself, like sage as in someone who's just wise. Now, in fairness, I think the term wizard, I don't remember. Did they say this in Ring of Power?
Well, I don't
remember if I'm mixing up if that actually comes from Ring of Power or not. But wizard, shouldn't it be someone who's just wise? But sage specifically, especially because it's actually used as a quote unquote conversational term. Someone who's a sage, someone who is wise. My view, in magical terms of what a sage is someone who isn't necessarily intelligent based or study based like a wizard, but more so is wise on things regarding life and reality and the world. So much so that, dare I say, it's borderline Jedi, where it's more they quote unquote feel things, and it's more the wisdom of their mind influences their surrounding environment to the point that maybe their wisdom allows them to understand people's thoughts, so it's borderline telepathy, or possibly even borderline magical telekinesis or whatever, or possibly even seeing into the future, although that spills into like a seer or oracle. In fact, we could even make a difference here, maybe to me at least. The difference between a sage and an oracle, for example, is sage, someone who understands the minds of others and uses their mind to the point that maybe it's even hard to differentiate if is it magical or are they just really clever or something like that, with maybe some magical effects like, moving things with their minds and whatever. Or an oracle who just is able to actually see things beyond without affecting the reality of the world around them in a physical level. It's more knowledge based in the sense of they can see maybe into the future, and seeing through time is a major implication in and of itself.
Well, maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like what you're, and I don't disagree with you because this could be partially because of, my American understanding of magic versus the European, viewpoints. But to me, a sage is somebody who is wise. Although to me, sages always felt a little bit more divine sensed, like it was a calling more than anything. But I think I kind of almost like the idea that a wizard is based on intelligence and learning and furthering through study and academia, essentially. Whereas, a sorcerer is more intuitive, and their base of power is more based on themselves and how they feel it. But maybe a sage is based on experience and, like you were saying, wisdom. Like they haven't necessarily studied it in in an academic sense, but maybe like the person who, you have the guy who went to college for 10 years and became a doctor, versus the guy who taught himself how to be like a carpenter, or like some or an artisan of some sort, where it's more just hit the ground running. Like you didn't necessarily school yourself academically, but you schooled yourself through experience, and now you create these beautiful wonders because of all the experience that you've gained over the years. So it is more experienced and wisdom based, but kind of somewhere falling in between wizard and sorcerer, where
Yeah, it's more so, well, how you channel it, where it comes from, and what aspect of yourself I guess you're using to create the magical output.
Yeah.
Whereas instead, I was just saying what my personal interpretation is on this. And
and that's interesting that to you, like, an oracle just is somebody who can see the future, because in my mind, an oracle, when I think of oracle, I think of like,
Batman's character.
Yes, no. I think of somebody who has been divinely called to see the future, like
Oh yeah, by all means. Like we're not even talking about if it's divine based or not. I'm just saying that
that's what they do.
The thing that they do
magic
is that they see into the past, present, future, whatever. Yes, maybe they could even see with more sense than just like their vision. Maybe they can taste the future. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, and to me, sages feel more nature based than arcana based. But I don't know. Like, that's just my personal opinion.
And maybe they even don't have control over it.
Yeah. Or
like
they can
a sage
whatever.
has more control, maybe, versus an oracle who, like, randomly has these visions, and they can't stop it, and they don't know when they're gonna happen or not. In which case, man, the emotional stress of occasionally having these visions, not knowing when they're going to happen, for how long, how distracted you'll be. Imagine, like, if you're driving or something and you get a vision, and you get a vision that you're about to crash. I wonder why.
The irony.
Or, for example, another difference is, for example, among these that we chose, mage. Mage, at this point, considering what we said so far, I could consider a mage maybe being that one category that's like halfway between some of these. Like, for example, halfway between the intellectual wizard and the swole sorcerer or something.
Yeah.
And speaking of which, man, maybe sorcery being also based on like the physique. since it comes from within.
You just have the himboist sorcerer, the Johnny Bravo of sorcerers.
Oh my god, I love that so much. Oh, for those of you who don't know, I am obsessed with classic Cartoon Network. That was my temple when I was a kid. I am at least for what we're showing here in Italy. And I watched it in English, obviously, but I'm obsessed with all of that. So a sorcerer, Johnny Bravo, is amazing. But even not even like a Johnny Bravo type, more so just if it's based more on yourself comes from within and all the motivational speeches that can inspire that. And maybe the more in shape you are, the more control you have over your spells and stuff like that. Bro, do you even cast?
Yeah, exactly. It's not necessarily that you're getting in shape. It's that you're shaping your your
spells,
your magic into something that's like outwardly affecting you.
Yeah.
To me, a mage's source of power has always been unclear to me.
Yeah, mage is always the general term of mad person who can do magic.
But I almost feel like in some ways...
Which is different from magician, by the way, who is just like more, I think, more showmanship.
Illusory, yeah.
Like at most Zatanna.
Yeah, when I think of mage, I think of like a magus. I think of somebody who's...
A magus? I never heard that.
Yeah. Oh, you haven't?
Oh, shit. I don't think...
It's a term. New terms.
Wow.
David learns a new term on this episode.
Yay! Wow, I really didn't heard magus. Okay.
But to me,
sounds like maggot, but okay.
Yes, well, you can't help that. To me, a mage is somewhere that's partially somewhere between arcana and divine. Like their power isn't necessarily a divine power, but perhaps it is a gifted power that's more arcana based than divine based. Like to me it always has seemed more like one of those things where, like, you know, the gods have decided to give these people powers and they became mages, and it's not like they have like cleric like powers from D&D. It's more like they have wizard like powers from D&D or something like that. But I mean, I'm just giving a D&D example, but I mean, when you're reading like media and you're reading like, you know, high fantasy kind of things, to me maguses kind of seem more like almost like an arcana based warlock instead of having like a patron. They're just, you know, freely given these powers, but their powers are more arcana based.
I actually just had an idea of, like, in our at least categorization and view of this podcast, maybe so for warlocks, maybe we can even consider, unless we specifically imply that there is some divine power or some massive specific source that these magic users, the warlocks, can channel, maybe through a pact or whatever, something like conscious that they do. If all of these categories existed all at once, all of a sudden, maybe the warlocks would be the ones who, they don't have their own abilities, but they can channel the abilities of all the other ones if they allowed it to. They basically become the hotspot of magic users.
What is that one character in Silas from Heroes?
Oh man, it's been so long since. Oh man, it was only season 1 was.
Or for example, Rogue. For a different.
Yes, but I'm thinking. Yeah, but I'm saying they don't get to keep it. Like that's their main limitation. They can.
Well, then it is more like Rogue, because she touches you for a moment, and that's.
Yes, but Rogue can actually keep on and it doesn't have to be touching in our case scenario, because it has to be with the consent of the source they're drawing from, like of the other magic user. So Rogue touches, whether they like it or not, she's channeling some of their powers. She keeps doing it. She could actually kill them, but steal their power entirely for themselves. We're talking about like comic book Rogue, by the way, where she can actually fly and super punch and whatever. And she did that to the original Miss
Carol
Marvel.
Danvers, yeah. Although
the
limitation,
old school Carol Danvers, just to be clear.
The limitation on that within the comic books, at the very least, is, you know, the implication is that when she does that to a person, that person, injects themselves into her. And so she wouldn't just go around stealing everybody's powers like that because it messes with her brain. She starts to, have memories of Carol's, and she starts
Okay,
to
so
think like
it can become a
Carol.
mental overload. Load.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So she wouldn't necessarily touch everybody and just gain their powers. Oh, who's that one character on Heroes? It's been so long since I've seen it.
I
Where
know.
he was very similar to that, but it was just the powers. He didn't.
Oh no,
The
it's
younger brother
oh
of
it's
I can't
Peter.
remember his name.
Is it Peter Petrelli? It's the
Peter
one of the
Petrelli?
it's one of the Petrelli brothers,
Yes, it's the younger
played
one.
by, why do I remember his name? Milo Ventimiglia.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. That's the one I'm talking about.
Yeah, yeah. So I think it's Peter. I think the other one was called something else with an A. I forget. The one who can fly. But yeah, I think it's Peter. Correct me if I'm wrong, guys. Online in the comments. Peter doesn't have his own powers, but he copies the powers of whoever is around him.
Yeah.
But that's the thing. He can just choose to like copy the powers of whoever.
Copy pasta.
Copy pasta, sure. Hey, I'm Italian. That's offensive. Uh, and he can just do it, and he can do it through multiple people at once, and it's a copy, literally. Whereas instead, in our case, for warlocks, if we're excluding divine beings that they can channel, if it's all these people, they don't have any magic of their own, but they can just hotspot the magic of whoever's around them, but they need their willing consent. So I imagine the other magic users would be willingly aware if a warlock is trying to ask, they could feel them asking to borrow their powers, and they have to like basically allow them to do this or not. And maybe, I don't know, maybe if they're too, maybe if like a sorcerer is like too weak or whatever, the warlock says, hey, let me channel your powers. I have enough stamina of my own, so I'll be using my own stamina and channel your abilities. So it's they basically be using the same source and multiplying by 2 the amount of magic that sorcerer can do, or something like that. I don't know. For this scenario, this is what I'm thinking of. What could be a not exaggerated
Alternate source.
world building warlock?
I mean, that's a pretty wild view of warlocks, and certainly the implications of what would cause somebody to be able to borrow powers would be an interesting question to explore.
Yeah.
Because to me, warlocks are always just somebody who gets their magic from something else.
Yeah, but
it.
that a lot of times it's that one thing they take their source from, and that's it. Whereas in this case, they can take it from whoever. If they could even mix. If you have one warlock and then one wizard and one sorcerer, the warlock can says, "Yo, give me both. We have this big boss to defeat or whatever," and then the warlock can do multiple fireballs with the intensity of that of a sorcerer. So like,
I mean, Are we getting OP? Are we breaking our own limits?
not I don't think necessarily, because then the warlock has nothing of their own, and even then, both of the other two have to consent.
That's true. I mean, the implications of that and how it would affect our world would be frightening.
Yeah, that would be. That's we'll be doing our different episodes on each one of these. At least on our own views and whatever, and discussing what limitations, what details they have, what they can't do, etc. But yeah, these are, I don't know, is there anything else we want to discuss?
I mean, there's probably lots of stuff that we could discuss.
Because this is a very, 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 very big topic, guys. We were even discussing, debating the idea of making just one quick episode of this until we realized this is going to be way too long. So
we were such sweet summer children when we went into this podcast.
Until we were the naivete
until we decided there was more than one type of magic user, and then we were like, oh no,
and then,
what have we done?
And then we realized, wait, math's a thing. We have to multiply every single one of these. Oh no.
So anyway, I think this is more of like a
introduction,
a very long and sad introduction into an idea that we have.
Very sad. And, you've been very patient, folks.
Yes, but we are very interested to think of to know what you guys think about this, because Again, my idea of wizard is going to be way different from somebody else's idea of a wizard, and that's just, based on personal opinions and cultural opinions about what magic is even. So please, in the comments, let us know your ideas. Let us know if you think we're way off base. Let us know if you think we're spot on, and tell us what you'd like to hear about. Tell us who you'd like to hear about next. What do you want our first topic of discussion to be? Wizard, witch, druid?
Yeah, if you have specific requests, we'll follow those. Otherwise, we'll figure out whatever we can.
Have we forgotten something else? Tell us.
Oh yeah, if there's anything we missed, obviously magic is a broad topic.
Broad.
So if there is anything specific that we missed, then definitely let us know. We'll be tackling the various kinds of magic users. We'll be talking about what aspects of the world they will be influencing and in what ways. We will be talking about, if needed, the sources, their own sources. Possibly we'll be discussing other details, for example, on their crafts and tools, maybe if potions are involved or not, or if it's only spell casting, limitations, possible, magical creatures if needed in the future, and whatever it is, with the caveat that we're implying that it's from this day, in this modern day onward,
and
all of a sudden.
We'd even be interested in talking about, the difference between modern folklore that we all know about.
Yeah.
We all know and love today. Like, are we talking about Lord of the Rings wizards, or are we talking about Harry Potter wizards? We might get into discussions of how different types of...
Or are we talking about tech whizzes?
Exactly. Babylon 5, techno wizards, or techno mages.
Oh shit, I didn't know I didn't see the show. I didn't know that was the thing. Okay.
But yeah, we definitely could bring in pop culture references of magic into the discussion as well. So
plenty.
If you're interested in that, so are we.
Oh yeah. So yeah. All right. I guess that sort of wraps it up for today then, right? I think we're kind of covered for our first episode.
Yes, this is verbal diarrhea of an episode brought to you by ADHD.
Oh my god, it's so true. All right, folks. So thank you very much for listening to this first episode of Worldbuilding Fantasy. We hope that you enjoyed it. Let us know everything else in the comments down below, and we will see you in the next episode. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.